Hello and welcome to the Counterpoint podcast. I'm your host, Peter Richardson, and I'm delighted to be joined today by two analyst colleagues of mine, Arushi Chawla and Pavel Nair. Hello, Arushi. Hello, Pavel. How are you today?
Hi, Peter. Very fine. Thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good. Enjoying some fine weather for once in the UK here. Hey, Pavel, how's it going?
Yeah, all going good here. And we're in a humid condition in Delhi.
Yeah. So it's for once it's like 30 degrees in the UK, which is beautiful. But we're still in the lockdown situation, although some countries are beginning to come out of it. So I need to give the usual caveat at the beginning of the podcast that there may be noises off, dogs barking, children shouting, that sort of thing. But actually, the topic of today's podcast is it's very much about the coronavirus situation. So Arushi and Pavel have done a study recently, one of our consumer lens studies. So we're talking to consumers around the world about the impact of COVID-19 on the smartphone market. So Arushi, maybe you can start us off and just explain a little bit of the rationale behind doing this research study and what we were trying to find out.
Sure, Peter. So, last few months have been very difficult for all of us, as we know. This presence and ongoing spread of COVID is giving people a hard time globally. As a ripple effect of which, there is a change in consumers' opinion based on their spending preference. So, to understand this new normal when it comes to consumer behavior towards smartphone, we got our objective for the study. So we've conducted this study across major countries, and the study is divided in many segments, starting from current mobile choices to future purchase preferences with the touch of coronavirus. So that's how the study goes.
Okay, and which you mentioned that we covered a number of smartphone markets. Obviously the coronavirus has been traveling across the world. So when you kind of look at the data about the virus, obviously it started in China, spread to a couple of markets in Southeast Asia, and then popped up in Europe, and then now where we see it is really kind of centered on the Americas. So which markets did we focus on for the study?
So this study covers 7 major economies: United Kingdom, United States of America, Germany, France, Spain, India, and Italy. When we come to US and India, they are the biggest market for smartphones. Whereas China, it has a complete different demographics. Now, talking about the Western Europe, we've taken the major countries from many. So that is how we've covered our study across countries.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rishi. So turning to you, Pavel. So obviously that many of the markets that Arushi's just outlined are pretty mature markets, so very much in the replacement type markets. India's maybe a little bit different, and it's one of the fastest, or has been one of the fastest growing smartphone markets because we've got a big kind of transition between feature phone to smartphone going on. Plus many new users coming in. So can you maybe sort of outline some of the key findings, particularly in relation to?
Yep. Thanks, Peter. So if you look at replacement cycle as a one parameter, I think we need to broaden our perspective in this because there are multiple factors involving in this particular trend. One of which is about how certain people are about their incomes. And what we figure out that a lot of people have lost job across countries, across geographics, and that affected their uncertainty of earning in the current phase as well as for future, and that also affected the way they spend on different devices, especially buying a smartphones. And for this particular study, what we figure out across these 7 countries, there is a common trend that people will like to wait for longer period of time, and almost half of them said so. And couple of countries saw this impact, compared to other more severely. India is one of them, mainly because of there are a lot of you know lot of workers which involve in non-formal economic activities, they are affected the most. And due to that, close to 60%, even more than 60% of Indian respondents said they will wait for longer period of time. Similarly, we have seen the pattern in Spain and Italy as well. So as overall, if you talk about India as a market, we are expecting the current replacement rate cycle will increase. For example, right now it's around 21 to 22 months period, which will likely to go up to 26 to 27-month period, but maybe most probably by next year.
The replacement cycle. Yeah, right. So, I mean, when we look at the smartphone markets across the world, something that we've seen over the last couple of years actually is this lengthening of the replacement cycle, um, which is, I think, testament in a way to the quality of the devices that people are buying these days. The smartphones are now so good that they do pretty much everything that anyone would want them to do, and they do that very well. Even down to sort of the lower end of the price bands, so that there hasn't really been a strong incentive to upgrade. And I guess when you throw into the mix this economic uncertainty created by coronavirus, if your device is still working, then and you can afford to wait to replace, then probably you will, right? So, and I guess one of the other questions then is, if people are going to replace their device, will they spend roughly the same amount of money when they replace, or will they spend less? So, Arushi, maybe you can touch on that. I mean, did our study, look at the likely spending patterns when people are coming to buy a new smartphone?
That is a great point to highlight, I must say. So, because of the COVID, there is certainly a cut down in budgets, and more than half of respondents plan to cut down their budget for next smartphone purchase. To be more precise, if we talk about like a cut down of 20% of more in their budget, Spain is at the top. It is followed by Italy and then US. However, it is also important to point out that there is other segment of people who are not cutting their budgets, right? And it is important to incorporate that segment as well. And there's so many people safe in their home, which usually used to spend a lot in their daily life for on their apparels, on their transportation, and many other things. But now they only have devices, laptops, smartphones, what they use the most. So there is a curiosity in them to, shift this spending towards smartphones and other devices. So while making our forecast for different studies, we also take such points in consideration. So this study actually turned out to be very fruitful for us.
Okay. So when we've looked at the US, what we've seen is that people on lower, in this lower salary bands are more likely to have lost their jobs than people in the higher earning bands. So, that would suggest that, the higher end of the market is maybe more resilient to change than perhaps the mid and low ranges. Did we see that in the study?
Yeah, so if we talk about their spending pattern, then as I just mentioned, major section cut down their budget, which certainly implies that the average selling price goes down. To be more specific, two-thirds of UK consumers are considering buying a smartphone according to their usual plan. However, half of the respondents from India intend to spend 135 USD to 250 USD, which is way lower than before.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. So, something that, again, that we've seen, and this is, there's sort of anecdotal evidence for this and some of the reports, financial results reports from operators and other players are sort of showing that there has been a switch to more online purchasing. But as we kind of look towards the end of this kind of lockdown period, hopefully that's going to come, and certainly in the UK, in the last few weeks we've seen stores reopening. But Pavel, is it likely that we're going to see a return to people kind of going to stores, or is the switch to online going to be more of a permanent fixture, do you think, looking ahead?
I believe, as well as the outcome of this particular study showing that there are certain number of people, at least more than half of them, are still considering to avoid social gathering and keep maintaining that distance as well going out. And that is a constant pattern we have seen, especially in countries like India, US, and in more majorly affected countries like Italy, Spain, right? So there we believe people will likely avoid social uh, gathering and prefer a low touch option. And the current available low touch option is either you buy from any e-commerce stores, or you order online and get it delivered on your home or a nearest location or a nearest shop. And that can happen through your operator channel as well as your other way of purchasing smartphones. And it is well defined in most developed countries, especially in US and Western Europe. But for countries like India, where the distribution channels are mixed up, right? There we have seen a lot of interest, people looking forward to have O2 as a new option. So considering the current trend, right, we are already seeing close to percentage between 30 to 40% use online as a purchase channel, but then majority, which is around 60%, is still prefer offline. So those offline users are moving towards finding new ways to purchase from the local shop. And a lot of brands also have taken initiative to ease that process.
Yeah, maybe you can develop that thought a bit. So brands are obviously suffer or have been suffering, and particularly in India where the lockdown was almost 100% in a way, because even smartphones were not allowed to be bought online, right? So um, so as things ease a little bit, so what are the different brands doing to uh, help the concerns that consumers may have, but also then help themselves get you know back into business in a good way?
So we have seen a lot of brand taking initiative. For example, Xiaomi, they have opened their mi commerce web app, and that's basically enable consumer to place order from their nearest stores. Similarly, for Samsung, they partnered with Bnow, which is a inventory management portal. So the users can place order from there, as well as the store owner can put out their inventory, so for the users to order from that portal. Similar ways, other brand like for example Vivo also using other ways of messaging as a platform for taking orders or reach out for to the consumer for service and other purposes. And interestingly, I think Oppo has taken that to one step further. They are also using WhatsApp as a medium, because WhatsApp is penetrated deep into tier 2 and tier 4 cities in India, right? So they are taking order as well as raising service requests from them.
Hmm. Okay, so you know we're seeing some shifts in the distribution channels, but also changes in the commercial behavior of brands, which I think there's some innovation going on here, which is probably going to sustain beyond the end of this, and yeah, we might see some you know more fundamental changes in the way that companies do business, I guess. Um, so Arushi, we kind of touched on the pricing before, but does the study kind of reveal anything more about spending patterns that we're likely to see uh, over the next 6 months to, I guess 6 months to 1 year is, maybe 1 year is a little bit of a stretch in a consumer study, but what would you say, is likely to happen in terms of consumer spend in the near future?
So if you talk about short term, maybe 6 months along the line, then I would say the major section, as it comes from the study, major sections still look forwards to cut down their budget because they're uncertain about their future income. and they're uncertain about their health and everything. So being like, as we know, we and everyone, most of them are risk averse. So taking that into consideration, people would be spending less. The average selling price will go down. However, as we expect a healthier future, they would be saving as well. So we might expect a bigger market, uh, like expansion in smartphone market in the coming future, which is after 6 months, maybe nearly a year after. Yeah. So that is something from macro perspective that we can see.
Okay. Um, something which, obviously, I alluded at the top of the podcast that, there may be sounds of children and shouting, and that's because many kids have not been able to go to school, so they've been having to rely on online education platforms, with some parental involvement sometimes. So the that these different ways of working, both kind of remote access, working from home, but also education taking place at home, perhaps more home entertainment having to be because you can't go out and enjoy yourself outside. So um, what is that indicating, Pavel, in ways in which people might invest in technology to support these new ways of being?
Yep. So, Peter, I think this is a very unique circumstances if you think about, right? Especially in the perspective of developing countries, for example, India. If you consider a smart device for your child, it maybe comes as a default for countries like US or Western Europe market, right? Where people, when children go to school, they always have a smart device to submit or do their assignment. But in a country like India, it's always considered like uh, smart device may be a point of distraction for children during their school days, right? And that bring a negative connotation in the mind of parents, that if we give a smartphone or a laptop or any other smart device, the children will likely spend more time on watching videos or playing video games and all other distracting activities. But due to this particular pandemic, that forced school, colleges, and institution to adopt this, the way they teach their children to convert in a more digital form, and that also forced the student and parents to adapt to those changes. And as a result, now especially in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, which hardly have any digital infrastructure for teacher as well as for institution, have created using right now are using different social media app, for example Zoom and other, to communicate with their with these children and students as well as those parents for parent teachers meeting, right? And this engagement help to develop a positive attitude to have a smart device for their children, so that they can engage quite easily and explore different knowledge material that are already out there across the internet. And as a result, as a outcome of this particular study, we found out that close to 7 out of 10 respondents, they said they will buy a device for a smartphone specifically for their children. And here another interesting point: why is a smartphone? Why not a laptop? Or why not a you know maybe an iPad or um, a tablet, right? India as a country again comes with certain characteristics. One of them is not consistent power supplies. If you have a laptop or maybe any other device that which are larger in size, will have limited in terms of mobility. So you need one place to put it and charge it, right? So in a smaller cities, they have frequent power cut and all, so people go to different places or change places for the charging, that's a unique trait that only India have. And mobile enable that. On the top of that, it has budget friendly, like you can get a very good mobile in 120 or $130, right? And that's also give equal opportunity for majority of the person in the consumer segment to engage their children in a digital form of education.
All right, interesting stuff. And just before we wrap up the podcast, Pavel, something which I wanted to ask. That we've seen in the news in the last week or 10 days or so that there has been this tension on the border between India and China. Actually, kind of leading to conflict and casualties, sadly. I think there already was a little bit of anti-China sentiment. There were some apps that were being offered in India to check if you had Chinese apps on your phone. But what have we seen in this in the last week or so in terms of growth in this anti-China sentiment, and is that likely to have an impact on the India market?
Yeah, before I jump into this topic, I just like to mention that this particular study that we are discussing is conducted before this particular phase of at line of control between India and China. So the overall outcome of this whatever sentiments we're getting is before that. So now coming to the point, about anti-China sentiment. So our approach is to understand, because Wuhan was the starting point for COVID-19, right? And there may be some sort of sentiment about not to use any product manufactured in China. So we wanted to test that. Like, do consumer really care about that as a prospect when buying their next smartphone? And what we figure out that this particular sentiment is actually highest among Indians. And needless to mention, it is not only about COVID-19. There is a upcoming state election that about to happen in different places in India. So lot of political groups are also using this as a part of their campaign strategy. So that may be help in shaping the overall sentiment as well. Other than that, so in this particular study, what we figure out, almost half of the consumer in from or half of the respondent from India said that they have some sort of negative sentiment towards China or made in China products or Chinese smartphone brands. And about more interestingly, about 4 out of 10, close to like 40 to 42% have said that will not buy a phone from this smartphone brand from China or made in China device. So at this point, it may look like a very you know highly motivated decision, but I believe it may change over the time depending on how the overall geopolitical thing plays off. Over the top, we also believe there will likely have other market dynamics, because in India most of the players right now are have Chinese origin. So other than Samsung and Apple, most of the other brands who are capturing most of the market are from either affiliated some sort of Chinese origin or directly from China. So this will limit users to look for many alternatives when they make their purchase decision, and thus may leads to may not leads to severe impact in long run because of that limited availability of any other brands.
Okay. All right. So, Pavel, Harushi, thanks very much for the discussion. Very interesting. And if you do want to know more about the consumer research study that we've been talking about, please do contact us or check the Counterpoint website. But for now, thanks for listening, and look forward to talking to you again on the next Counterpoint podcast. Many thanks. Bye now.